Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most complicated and, frankly, most important parts of modern conflict: information warfare. And we're going to do that by taking a hard look at the playbook Russia put into action leading up to its 2022 invasion of Ukraine.
Right, so to really get this, you have to understand that the first shots in this war weren't fired in 2022. They were fired years before, in the form of ideas. This quote right here from a long essay by Vladimir Putin in 2021 isn't just some historical take. It's the ideological launchpad for the entire invasion. It's a story crafted to literally erase a country's right to exist before a single tank ever crossed the border.
So here's our roadmap. First, we'll talk about the war before the war. Then we'll tear down Russia's information playbook piece by piece. After that, we'll see how well it actually worked versus how Ukraine fought back. And finally, we'll look at how this same playbook is echoing around the world. Okay, let's jump in with the war before the war. Because here's the most important thing to grasp. The 2022 invasion wasn't the starting gun. It was really the final lap of a race that had been running for years. This is all about shaping what's called the cognitive battlefield. The main goal wasn't just about military prep. It was about trying to win the war in people's heads, in Russia, in Ukraine, and all over the world before the physical fight even began. It's about making your version of events the reality, weakening your opponent from the inside out, and basically confusing the rest of the world so they don't act. So, how'd they actually try to do it? Let's pop the hood on Russia's information playbook and really break down the theories, the stories, and the tactics they used. At the very core of this strategy is a really old-school Soviet idea called reflexive control. And it's pretty chilling when you get into it. The point isn't to force your enemy to do something. The point is to feed them very specific bits of information so that they choose to do the exact thing you wanted them to do all along. It's like a game of psychological chess where you guide your opponent's hand to topple their own king. And this theory gets put into practice with 4 pretty clear tactics that analysts have started calling the 4 Ds. First, you dismiss. Just deny everything, even if the evidence is overwhelming. Think of the little green men in Crimea. Second, you distort. You twist the facts, like calling an invasion a special military operation. Third, you distract. When you're accused of something, you change the subject with a whataboutism, pointing fingers at someone else's past actions. And fourth, you dismay. Use big, scary threats and military muscle flexing to intimidate everyone else into staying out of it. And what's really fascinating is seeing how these tactics were used to push very specific stories, each one aimed at a different group of people. For the audience back home in Russia, the story was this moral crusade of denazification. For people in Ukraine, it was the one nation story, designed to tear down their sense of national identity. For the rest of the world, a completely fabricated genocide in Donbass was the excuse to go in, while the NATO aggression narrative was aimed squarely at the West to shift blame and create division. You put all this together, and you get what researchers have this great name for: the fire hose of falsehood. The idea is to blast out a massive amount of information, a lot of it totally contradictory. Like one minute, Ukraine is a powerful Nazi superstate, and the next, it's a weak puppet that's about to collapse. See, the goal isn't really to convince you that any one lie is true. The goal is to overwhelm you, to exhaust you, until you just give up and decide the truth is impossible to find. So you might as well just tune out completely. And to power this fire hose, you need a pretty big digital arsenal. We're talking state media giants like RT and Sputnik, and tons of clone websites. We're talking coordinated cyber attacks to take down government and banking sites, even data-wiping malware. Then, of course, you've got the infamous troll farms and armies of bots to just amplify all these messages. And here's the wild part. They even created fake fact-checking sites with names like War on Fakes, whose whole purpose was to attack real journalism and just make the truth even harder to find. Which leads us to the big million-dollar question: impact versus resilience. With all the sophisticated machinery, with this whole playbook, did any of it actually work? Well, the gap between what was supposed to happen and what actually happened was huge. The whole point of the information war was to set the stage for a quick, easy victory. The expectation was that Ukrainian society would crumble from within and that the West would be too divided and slow to react. The reality?
The literal opposite. We saw incredible national unity in Ukraine and a surprisingly strong, consolidated response from the West.
And there's hard data to back this up. Take that core one nation narrative. A poll from April 2022, just after the invasion started, found that a staggering 91% of Ukrainians disagreed with it. So the very idea that was supposed to dissolve their identity actually ended up galvanizing it like never before.
So why? Why did this all backfire so badly inside Ukraine? Well, this quote from a Ukrainian security expert has this perfect analogy. He said that for 8 years, ever since 2014, Ukrainian society had been getting these small, constant doses of Russian propaganda. It basically acted like a vaccine, letting the whole society build up antibodies so they could recognize the virus when the full-blown infection hit in 2022. And this immune system wasn't just one thing. It had a bunch of key parts. It started from the ground up, with amazing fact-checking groups like Stop Fake, which, by the way, was founded way back in 2014. You also had a really resilient and critical independent media, you had official government centers for strategic communication, and maybe most importantly, you had a whole population that had basically earned a master's degree in media literacy through years of tough experience.
But in the end, the most powerful argument against the fire hose of lies wasn't a clever countermessage. It was just reality. When bombs are falling on your cities and your neighbors are being killed, no amount of propaganda in the world can convince you that you're being liberated. The physical truth on the ground just got too loud to be ignored. So let's zoom out for our final section, the playbook's echo. Why does this one case in Ukraine matter so much for the rest of us? Because this playbook, it's not a one-off. Its strategies are being watched, adapted, and mirrored, especially by China in its campaign targeting Taiwan. China has its own, very similar strategic idea called the three warfares, and the parallels are just impossible to miss. You have public opinion warfare to control the story, psychological warfare to weaken the will to fight, and legal warfare to create a justification for your claims. It's the exact same logic: win your political goals without having to resort to military force if you can.
I mean, look at the comparison. Russia's ethnic one-nation narrative becomes China's cultural one-family story. Russia blaming NATO aggression is mirrored by China blaming foreign interference. The tactics are a little different, though. China's approach often seems more subtle, using local influencers, precision economic sanctions instead of broad energy blackmail. The end goal might be the same, unification, but the preferred path is to achieve it without ever firing a shot.
And this playbook is constantly evolving. We're already seeing a move away from the loud, aggressive wolf warrior diplomacy towards something much more subtle. We're talking about friendly packaging, using AI to create seemingly harmless or even positive content to build trust with an audience before you start feeding them disinformation. It's a much more sophisticated, long-term game. And that brings us here. The case of Ukraine shows us both the incredible power of modern information warfare, but also its ultimate limits when it comes up against a resilient society and just plain hard reality. But it also shines a bright light on a global playbook. So the critical question for every open, free society is this: when information itself becomes the battlefield, how do you even begin to win a war for the truth?